Captain Elias had always believed that space was a place for the brave, the curious, and the ones willing to risk everything for discovery. Yet even he had never seen anything like the glowing nebula stretching before him. Waves of pink and violet light danced across the darkness, swirling like molten glass, and his small ship, the Aurora, drifted through it as if carried by some unseen hand. The hum of the engines was comforting, familiar, a reminder that he was alive and still in control. But as he scanned the nebula with his instruments, an alert flashed across the dashboard. Something massive was approaching fast, and it wasn't on any star charts he knew. His heart skipped a beat, a mixture of fear and excitement surging through him. From the swirling light emerged a ship of breathtaking design. Its shape was unfamiliar, yet elegant, with surfaces that shimmered like liquid metal under the nebula's glow. The alien vessel moved with precision, not a single part out of place, as if the stars themselves were its guide. Elias tightened his grip on the controls. His mind raced, knowing this could be his first contact with a truly alien intelligence. But he also felt a strange calm. He had faced storms, pirates, and cosmic radiation before, yet something about this moment made him feel alive in a way nothing else had. As the alien cruiser drew closer, a pulse of soft light radiated from it. It wasn't a weapon, he realized, but some form of communication. His ship's AI struggled to interpret it, and for a moment Elias felt the weight of silence pressing against him. Then through the viewports he saw her, a figure standing at the bridge of the alien ship. Tall, regal, and glowing in the soft nebula light, she seemed both human and entirely otherworldly. Scales of gold and silver shimmered across her skin, reflecting the nebula's colors. Her eyes, large and intelligent, met his, and in that instant Elias felt a strange warmth, a spark of connection that he couldn't explain. He tried to focus on his instruments, but his gaze kept returning to her. There was no fear in her eyes, no aggression, only curiosity. She raised a hand slowly as if testing him, and he mirrored her gesture. The pulse from her ship intensified, and the AI translated fragments of her message. "Traveler, are you friend?" Elias smiled despite himself. "I hope so," he whispered, his voice lost in the hum of his ship. Moments later, the alien cruiser adjusted its course, matching his speed. Elias' heart raced. This was dangerous. He had no idea if she intended peace or war. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had been meant to happen, that the universe had guided him here for a reason. He recalled the stories of explorers before him, humans who had vanished into space without a trace. They had risked everything for the unknown. He understood now why. There was something intoxicating about the unknown, a call that made even the most careful mind take a leap of faith. The nebula's light painted both ships in shades of pink and violet. For a brief moment, it felt as if time slowed. Elias could see the small details on her ship, delicate patterns etched along the hull, lights pulsing in rhythm with the nebula. The alien's movements were graceful, deliberate, like a dance. And yet there was power in her stance, authority and confidence that made him respect her immediately. He realized that she wasn't just a commander, she was a queen. As their ships floated in the nebula, a quiet understanding passed between them. Neither spoke, yet both knew that the meeting was important. The universe was vast, and yet here in this glowing sea of stars and color, two beings from different worlds had found a moment of connection. Elias' chest tightened with anticipation. Something extraordinary was about to begin, something beyond maps, charts, or even his imagination. He felt a flicker of hope, a hope that this first encounter could change everything for both of their worlds. And in the silent hum of the Aurora, with the alien queen watching him intently, Captain Elias understood one truth. Sometimes the universe reaches out to you not with a storm, but with a promise. The alien queen's ship, enormous and glowing, floated silently beside Elias' smaller vessel. For hours, neither moved, each studying the other through the shimmering nebula. Captain Elias felt both excitement and fear. This was uncharted territory, not just in space, but in diplomacy, in understanding a species that had never welcomed a human into their world before. He knew one wrong move could ignite war, yet he also knew that opportunity often came with risk. Taking a deep breath, he activated his translator and sent a simple message: "We can help." Seconds later, the Queen's voice echoed in his cabin, calm yet commanding, the words flowing smoothly through the AI. "We accept your offer, human, but trust is fragile here. You must prove your intent." Elias' heart pounded. He had expected caution, but not this direct acknowledgement. It was rare for her kind to speak plainly, even in translation. He nodded to himself as if she could see and prepared to do what humans did best, act with courage when words alone could not suffice. Over the next days, Elias followed the Queen's fleet to a nearby system where her ships had been stranded by gravitational anomalies. The scene that greeted him was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Giant structures floated in orbit, massive engines silent, and crew members drifting through zero gravity, their movements precise yet strained. The human's instincts immediately kicked in. He directed repairs, coordinated resources, and even risked moving closer to unstable orbiting debris, knowing that a single mistake could destroy years of careful construction. And yet the alien crew watched him, skeptical at first, then with cautious admiration. They had never seen someone act so boldly, so calmly under pressure. Observed silently from her bridge, her eyes never leaving Elias. She had ruled for decades, commanding fleets and making decisions that had kept her people alive in countless conflicts. She had faced traitors, rivals, and predators from across the galaxy. Yet she felt something unusual as she watched this human. He was fearless, yes, but there was something more, an empathy in his actions, a willingness to risk his own safety not for glory or power, but simply to help. It was unfamiliar, disarming, and it unsettled her more than she could admit. One evening, as repairs continued, Elias floated alongside a damaged energy core, working silently with a small team of alien engineers. Sparks flew, and a sharp alarm blared. The core was unstable. He glanced up at the approaching void, calculating angles and trajectories, and then made a decision. With careful precision, he detached a panel, redirecting the energy surge safely into the nebula. The engineers gasped and cheered in a language he did not understand. His lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, as she realized what he had done. Risking life not for recognition, but because it was the right choice. That was human courage. As the fleet stabilized and systems came back online, the Queen finally contacted him privately. "You have done what others would not. You have earned trust, partially." Elias smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Trust is earned through actions," he said simply. "I don't need thanks, I just want to help your people survive." Considered him quietly. She had faced humans in history, known their strengths and flaws, but rarely had one moved her so deeply. His simplicity, his bravery, his ability to act without hesitation or expectation, it stirred something inside her she did not yet understand. And though she would never admit it aloud, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps humans, this strange species, could do more than survive. Perhaps they could inspire change, unity, even something beyond survival, friendship, alliance, or even something closer. For the first time, the human captain and the alien queen shared a moment of quiet understanding. Neither needed words. The glow of repaired ships, the hum of functioning engines, and the silent nebula between them said more than language ever could. In that fragile silence, both realized something extraordinary. Despite their differences, despite the vast unknown between stars, two beings could find common ground through courage, compassion, and shared purpose. And as Elias watched her return to her bridge, her golden scales shimmering in the nebula light, he felt it too, a fragile connection that could grow into something powerful, something worth risking everything for. Days passed after the fleet had been repaired, yet the sense of calm was fragile. Captain Elias had thought the hardest part was earning trust, but he quickly realized that alliances were never simple. Inside the alien cruiser, whispers floated through the corridors like shadows. Advisors debated his presence, questioning why a human should hold influence over their queen's decisions. Generals argued that humans were reckless, unpredictable, even dangerous. And in some eyes, Elias felt the weight of their doubt, a silent challenge he could not ignore. One morning, as the nebula's colors shifted with the local star's light, alarms blared across both fleets. Sensors picked up multiple unidentified vessels approaching at high speed, weapons charged and energy flaring. A rival faction, one that had long contested its rule, was attacking, seeking to claim her system while her fleet was vulnerable. The Queen's expression hardened, a storm of authority passing across her features. Yet Elias noticed something else, a flicker of worry in her eyes, quickly masked. He stepped forward, feeling the responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humans thrived under pressure, and this was a test unlike any before. Elias, your ideas are unconventional, said, her voice calm but urgent. Can your human tactics withstand their firepower? He nodded without hesitation. I won't let them take this system. I need your trust, and then we'll act together. His confidence surprised even him, but he knew that hesitation could mean disaster. The battle began with sudden intensity. Lasers streaked across the void, engines flared, and explosions erupted like distant fireworks. The rival ships moved with deadly precision, attempting to split the fleet and target vulnerable points. Commanded her forces with practiced efficiency, her decisions flawless yet conservative. Elias, however, proposed bold maneuvers, zigzag patterns, split attacks, and feints that traditional alien tactics. Initially, her advisors bristled, whispering that he would cost them the battle, yet allowed it. With skill and daring, Elias led small strike teams into the heart of the enemy formation. He dodged energy blasts, guided alien ships through narrow asteroid belts, and exploited weaknesses the rival commanders hadn't anticipated. His actions weren't just courageous, they were brilliant. Slowly, the tide turned. Ships that had seemed lost regained control, enemy formations fractured, and his fleet began to push back with renewed strength. During the fight, observed him more closely than ever. He was fearless, yes, but he also cared deeply for every life around him. He risked his own safety to protect the smallest vessels, the youngest pilots, the engineers who were barely trained for combat. This combination of courage and empathy struck something in her that she had never experienced before. He reminded her that strength was not only measured in power or authority, but in the willingness to act for others, even when the odds seemed impossible. Hours later, when the last enemy ship fled into the nebula, the fleet floated in silence, battered but victorious. Elias breathed heavily, staring at the expanse of stars around them. He had survived, and somehow, against all probability, he had led a human-sized victory. Approached him, her golden scales glowing softly in the dim light. For a moment, no words were spoken. She only studied him, her gaze unreadable. Then she nodded once sharply and said, "You are remarkable, human." Elias felt his chest tighten, not from the exhaustion but from the weight of her words. It was more than praise. It was recognition from a ruler who had faced countless threats, who had seen cunning, strength, and loyalty in many forms. Yet she had never seen this combination in a human. In that silence, a bond deepened. The Queen and the Captain had survived not just a battle, but a test of trust, courage, and intuition. And both knew, unspoken yet certain, that this was only the beginning. But even as the stars shimmered in quiet celebration, Elias sensed that challenges were far from over. The rival faction would return. The whispers among her people would grow louder. And somewhere in the vast unknown of the galaxy, fate was preparing the next trial, one that would test not only skill, but hearts, loyalty, and the fragile beginnings of a connection that could change the course of both their worlds. The battle had ended, but the tension in the fleet lingered like a heavy fog. Captain Elias floated through the corridors of the alien Queen's ship, checking on the damaged systems and ensuring the crew's safety. His hands moved skillfully over controls, repairing what had been broken, stabilizing what had been at the brink of collapse. Every now and then he caught glimpses of observing him from the bridge, her golden scales shimmering in the pale light. There was curiosity in her gaze, but also something deeper, something he could not yet understand. Later, when the crew had settled and repairs were, invited him to the observation deck. The nebula stretched before them, a swirling sea of pink and violet that reflected softly on the polished floors. Elias leaned against the railing, taking in the colors and the silence. "It's beautiful," he said quietly, almost to himself. She joined him, standing close enough that he could feel her presence but without crowding. "Beauty is not often recognized in war," she replied, her voice melodic yet weighted with experience. "Yet somehow you see it in everything, even in chaos." Elias looked at her then, really looked, and noticed the lines of worry and fatigue that spoke of the burdens she carried. He thought of the battles she had fought, the fleets she had commanded, and the countless decisions that had fallen on her shoulders. Humans respected leaders, but he realized that aliens bore responsibility in a way he could scarcely imagine. And still, despite the weight of her duties, she had allowed him to act, to fight alongside her, to make choices. That trust, it humbled him. They spoke quietly about their lives, their worlds, and the small things that made them human and alien, yet oddly alike. Elias described the oceans on Earth, the laughter of children, and the warmth of sunlight on skin. shared stories of floating gardens, of crystal forests that hummed with life, and the traditions that bound her people together. There was laughter, too, soft and tentative, as though both were discovering friendship for the first time. Each word, each story, built a bridge between their worlds, and a spark began to form, a spark neither could ignore. As the night stretched on, Elias noticed her staring at him more often, not with judgment but with curiosity. "Why do you risk so much for us?" she asked finally. He shrugged, smiling faintly. "Because it's the right thing to do, because someone has to care, and because I believe in people even when it's hard." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the weight of his answer, and then nodded. "Humans, you are strange," she said softly, almost to herself. "But there is courage in you that is rare." For the first time, they shared silence that was not awkward but comforting. Elias could feel her presence as clearly as he could feel the stars outside, and he realized that the fear of the unknown was slowly giving way to trust. There was a bond forming, fragile yet undeniable, built on shared experience, mutual respect, and quiet moments like this, moments of connection that could withstand storms, wars, and uncertainty. That night, as they both returned to their respective quarters, Elias thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought him here. A human, alone in a galaxy that often dismissed his species, now stood beside one of the most powerful beings he had ever known. And the queen who had faced countless threats had allowed him into her world, her thoughts, her trust. The realization was exhilarating, terrifying, and strangely comforting all at once. Somewhere in the nebula, stars shimmered like eyes watching over them. Elias understood, in a way he had never understood before, that this connection, this fragile, growing bond, was as important as any victory in battle. Courage had brought him this far, but understanding, empathy, and shared moments like these would determine how far they could go together. And for the first time since entering this strange alien world, Elias allowed himself to hope, not just for survival, not just for victory, but for something deeper. A connection that could change both their worlds, and perhaps in its own quiet way, change the universe itself. Weeks passed since the battle, and the fleet slowly regained a sense of normalcy. Repairs were completed, the engines hummed steadily, and life aboard the alien cruiser settled into a quiet rhythm. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. Whispers among her advisors continued, some questioning the human captain's influence, while others marveled at his bravery. For Elias, the days had been filled with routine checks, strategic discussions, and moments of quiet reflection with. But he knew something was growing inside him, a feeling he could no longer ignore. The day of the festival arrived, a celebration of survival and unity. The aliens decorated their ships with glowing banners that floated in zero gravity, and the nebula itself seemed to shimmer more brightly in response. Music filled the corridors, melodic and alien, yet strangely harmonious. Danced in small groups, their movements precise but joyous. Elias walked beside, observing the traditions that had governed her people for centuries. He felt a mixture of awe and respect. Her world was beautiful, disciplined, and alive in ways he had never imagined. As the celebration continued, Elias noticed the queen watching him from the center of the grand hall. Her golden scales reflected the nebula's light, making her appear almost divine. Her presence was commanding, yet there was softness in her gaze, a quiet invitation that he could not ignore. The music shifted to a slower rhythm, and a hush fell over the hall. Crew members paused to witness something they could not yet understand. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him like gravity itself. He had spent weeks considering this moment, weighing the risks, the cultural boundaries, the impossible nature of what he was about to do. Yet courage had always been his guide. He stepped forward, holding a small human relic, a simple object yet meaningful on his world. It symbolized commitment, respect, and a willingness to face the unknown together. His hands trembled slightly, but his resolve was steady. The room seemed to hold its breath as he approached. "Your courage inspired me," he began, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "Your people deserve not only survival but hope, and I want to stand by your side not just as an ally but as your partner. Will you accept me?" Silence stretched across the room. Eyes widened, whispers died instantly, and even the nebula seemed to pause in anticipation. His expression was unreadable at first, her golden eyes fixed on him with a quiet intensity. For a heartbeat, Elias feared that he had miscalculated, that this human gesture might be misinterpreted in ways he could not undo. Then a soft smile broke across her face, radiant and warm, brighter than any star he had ever seen. "Wait, was that a proposal?" she asked, her voice carrying a mixture of amusement, awe, and something deeper. Elias nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Her gaze softened, and she extended her hand toward him. "Then I accept," she said. The simple words carried weight that echoed through the hall, through the fleet, and into the hearts of everyone present. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as crew members and advisors tried to process what had just happened. Elias felt a rush of relief, joy, and disbelief. The queen, the ruler of countless worlds, had chosen him, not for his power nor his station, but for his courage, his heart, and the bond they had forged in shared struggles. She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Humans, you are bold and yet remarkably kind." Elias smiled, feeling warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the nebula or the lights around them. For the first time, the impossible felt real. A human and an alien queen standing together not by duty but by choice. The celebration continued around them, but the moment belonged to them alone. It was a declaration of trust, hope, and unity, a bond that transcended worlds, species, and expectations. And as Elias stood beside, he realized that courage had brought him here, but love, respect, and connection would keep them moving forward together into the vast unknown. The hall was alive with celebration, yet for Elias, everything else faded into the background. The voices, the music, and the glowing lights seemed distant compared to the moment he shared with. Her hand rested in his, warm and steady, and he could feel the weight of her choice, the depth of trust she had placed in him. For centuries, she had ruled with power and precision, yet in this one act, she had chosen something entirely different: partnership, vulnerability, and connection. Elias' chest tightened, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and an almost overwhelming sense of honor. Led him to a quieter section of the ship, a balcony that overlooked the nebula swirling outside. The colors reflected in her scales, casting a golden-pink glow over her features. She studied him with a calm intensity, as if committing his every detail to memory. "Humans," she whispered almost to herself, "you are reckless yet astonishing." Elias smiled, unsure if he should laugh or bow. There was humility in her words, and yet they carried an immense respect he had never felt before. He realized that in her eyes he was more than a guest, more than a captain. He was a partner, a symbol of courage and hope. They spoke quietly, sharing thoughts and dreams that had never been spoken aloud in the fleet before. Elias told her about Earth's oceans, the forests, and the stars he had seen from his own skis. Shared memories of her crystal forests, of ceremonies held to honor ancestors, and of the countless decisions she had made that had shaped her people's future. Each story, each laugh, each quiet observation built a bridge between their worlds. Elias felt a connection stronger than any he had ever known, and he could see it mirrored in her eyes. As the night stretched on, they walked along the balcony, side by side, the nebula painting the universe around them. Elias felt her hand tighten slightly on his. "Do you understand?" she asked softly. "What you have done?" He shook his head gently. "I've acted with what I believe is right," he replied. "I didn't know it would lead here, but I'm glad it did." She smiled, a rare, genuine expression that revealed both power and tenderness. "You have changed more than you know," she said. "Not just the fleet, not just me, but everything. Humans are more capable than I ever imagined." The enormity of her words sank in. Elias realized that his courage, his choices, and his simple human empathy had made an impact far beyond what he had thought possible. For a human to be accepted by a queen of countless worlds, to stand beside her as an equal, was beyond anything he had dared to dream. He felt a surge of pride, not in himself alone, but in what humanity could achieve when it faced the unknown without fear. For hours they remained together, talking, laughing, and simply being. There was no need for ceremony or witnesses. The moment was theirs alone. Every gesture, every glance reinforced the bond they had begun to forge. Who had once been untouchable and distant, now shared herself with him in small, quiet ways, allowing a human to see the queen behind the legend, the woman behind the scales and armor. Finally, as the stars shifted and the nebula's colors began to fade with the approaching dawn, Elias realized something extraordinary. This bond was not temporary, not fragile, but enduring. Their worlds were vast, complex, and dangerous, yet together they could face anything. Courage had brought him to this point, but empathy, trust, and understanding would carry them forward. And as they stood side by side, looking out at the endless expanse of stars, Elias felt a quiet certainty. Being human was not a limitation. It was a gift. A gift that had earned him the trust of a queen, the admiration of a people, and the possibility of a future unlike any the universe had ever seen. The fleet had returned to a rhythm, but the air was different now. Every ship, every crew member felt the change that had swept through the fleet with the queen's acceptance of Elias. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a human standing beside their ruler, not by command, not by obligation, but by choice. It was unprecedented, and the ripple of hope it created could be felt in every corner of the galaxy. Humans, often underestimated, were now seen not as fragile outsiders, but as beings capable of courage, wisdom, and loyalty beyond measure. Elias and walked together on the observation deck, watching the nebula's shifting colors reflect across the countless ships. The lights glimmered like stars that had been brought within reach, and the quiet hum of the fleet seemed almost musical. "It feels different," Elias said softly, his eyes reflecting the colors of the swirling clouds outside. "Like we've changed something that goes beyond us." His gaze met his, and she nodded, a gentle smile touching her lips. "We have, and it will only grow. You've shown my people what courage, humanity, and trust can achieve." Together, they began to oversee the rebuilding of alliances with neighboring systems. The human captain's strategies, paired with the Queen's authority, created results no one had expected. Battles that might have ended in disaster were now avoided through careful planning and daring maneuvers that combined human intuition with alien technology. Observed him in awe as he inspired her people not just with skill, but with empathy, humor, and steadfast determination. He had become more than a human visitor. He had become a symbol, proof that courage and compassion could reshape the galaxy. Amidst these victories, their bond deepened. Elias learned the subtle language of her gestures, the quiet signals of her moods, and the rare moments when she allowed herself to be vulnerable. In turn, learned to trust without reservation, to let someone into her life without fear of weakness. They shared quiet walks through the ship's corridors, floating gardens, and observation decks, exchanging stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. The nebula, once just a backdrop to survival, now seemed a canvas for possibilities, their possibilities. One evening, after a long day of council meetings and fleet exercises, turned to Elias with a seriousness that made his heart beat faster. "Do you understand?" she asked softly. "How much you have changed everything?" He smiled, feeling the weight of her words. "I didn't come here to change the galaxy," he admitted. "I only wanted to help, but I suppose that's all anyone can do, try to make a difference." She reached out, resting her hand on his arm. "You have done more than that. You have united worlds, you have inspired courage, and most of all, you have shown that humans can stand beside us, not as subjects, but as equals." The fleet watched them, inspired and awed. Young pilots whispered of the human captain who dared to act when others hesitated. Engineers spoke of the bravery he had shown under impossible conditions, and soldiers marveled at how one human's courage had not only saved them, but had earned the trust and respect of the Queen herself. Stories of his deeds spread like starlight, reaching even distant worlds where humans had been regarded with indifference or suspicion. As the stars turned outside Elias and stood together on the observation deck, the nebula a swirl of pink, gold, and violet around them. "We've only just begun," he said softly. She smiled, her hand entwined with his. "And together," she replied, "we can face whatever comes, not as ruler and subject, but as partners, equals, and friends, perhaps more than friends." In that moment, the galaxy seemed smaller, the stars closer, and hope brighter. Humanity had shown its worth not through domination or conquest, but through courage, empathy, and steadfast heart. And beside the alien queen, Elias knew that their bond would endure every challenge, inspire countless lives, and prove a simple truth. Even in the vastest reaches of space, humans could shine. The nebula glowed, the fleet thrummed with life, and the human captain and alien queen looked forward into the infinite expanse together. The universe was theirs to explore, not with fear, but with courage, and for the first time it felt like home.